all, welcome to today's session, and I'm here to talk about getting started with SharePoint Framework. So we'll keep it very simple. Unfortunately, I don't have a working environment to show you the coding for SharePoint Framework, but I will walk you through some of the examples wherein you should be able to get started with SharePoint Framework. Okay, so what is mean by SharePoint framework and everything we are going to see. But quickly, it's like it is a modern way of developing solutions on top of SharePoint, modern SharePoint. But again, I will not say not only limited to SharePoint, but again, with SharePoint framework, we'll be able to develop the solutions on Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva connections, as well as for Outlook as well, right? So it is not right now limited to SharePoint development, but it is going beyond. But let us get started our journey with SharePoint framework. All right. So quick introduction about myself. I'm Nandajit Nachan. I'm from Pune, India. I'm Microsoft MVP for M365 apps and services, as well as Microsoft certified trainer. I work as a Microsoft 365 consultant and mostly I write blogs. I do share my YouTube videos and everything. Apart from that, I'm author of 3 books, including SharePoint Framework itself. So if in case you want to get started with your journey on SharePoint Framework, there is a book I wrote maybe a couple of years back, which is Mastering SharePoint Framework. Then again, I'm author of another 2 books on how to get your SharePoint 2019 environments as a hybrid one. And then again, the last one is about up and running on Microsoft Viva connection. Again, in the Viva connection as well, I talk more about how you will be able to extend the Microsoft Viva kind of an experience with SharePoint framework. All right. So that's quick introduction of me. So what we are going to cover up today is like we will have an overview of SharePoint framework. So again, I'm not very much sure like how everyone in this meeting is very much aware of SharePoint framework. But again, if in case you don't know anything about SharePoint framework, not to worry, we will keep it very simple. We will first dive into what is mean by SharePoint framework, how SharePoint framework came into the picture, and then we will see the other aspects like how we can start developing solutions for SharePoint with SharePoint framework, as well as not just SharePoint, but how we can use SharePoint framework to extend the solutions for Microsoft Teams. So like how we'll be able to develop tabs, messaging extension, those kind of and things for Microsoft Teams as well. Again, how even we'll be able to create the meeting apps kind of an experience in Microsoft Teams using SharePoint framework. And again, the last topic will be about how also we'll be able to create adaptive card extension, which is a new kind of an extension available with SharePoint framework, wherein you will be able to extend this capability to Viva connections. Okay, if in case even you don't know Viva connection, we will dive into that one as well. And then lastly, I will give some pointers about PNP. So PNP is kind of a framework through which you will be able to accelerate your SharePoint framework development very much faster. All right. Okay, so this is the agenda that we are going to cover today. So with that, let's start into what is mean by SharePoint framework. Okay, so if in case someone of you already have worked with SharePoint, so at least for me, I started my journey with SharePoint 2003. SharePoint 2003 was the version which was on premise probably 15 or 18 years back now. So SharePoint started its journey with almost 2 decades back. Okay, so SharePoint is very old in that fashion. It is almost 21 years old. So when it started, it was kind of an on-premises version with version of SharePoint 2001. And I'm fortunate to got a chance to work on most of the um, SharePoint kind of an versions on premises. So I got a chance to work with SharePoint 2003, 2007, which was MOS, then SharePoint 2010, 2013, 2016, and SharePoint 2019, which is the recent one, but on premises. All right. So what used to happen in those kind of an cases, like I'm talking about the SharePoint in general for the on-premises kind of an world. So in the on-premises, obviously you will have to build your own infrastructure. You need to have your own machines. You need to install required softwares on top of it. And again, SharePoint is one of that. So again, SharePoint comes up with or at that point of time, SharePoint came up with various roles of the server that you can get started for building up your farm. Okay, so probably you can have your application servers, you have your database server, and then again you have your web front-end server. So those are the specific roles that each of the server can have into the SharePoint farm. And when you will have those servers integrated together, you have your SharePoint farm. Okay. So in those cases, it was good that we had the entire control over how we want to set up the SharePoint, what are the features that we want to get included and everything. But again, there was a cons as well. So for example, let's say those era was the entirely server side era, wherein you need to start developing your solutions on top of server side coding. Okay, so that means probably you need to write your code with C# based thing. So in that cases, what used to happen is that we were using the server side object model. So in that case, you are writing your code, but again, you are directly deploying that code onto your SharePoint server or that SharePoint farm itself. So if in case you are not writing effective or productive kind of an code, probably you are contributing to the unwell kind of an infrastructure or an unwell kind of an code running for that server. So let's say, for example, you are not writing the effective code, you may bring down the productivity of your SharePoint itself. It may slow down the loading of the SharePoint pages. At the same time, for example, if you are writing a bad code, in that case, you might entirely take down your SharePoint site itself. If in case you are not doing the proper try catch, error handling, all those kind of a thing. Okay, so those were the era wherein we had the privilege to use the server, but again, there were pros and cons of it. Eventually, the whole world started moving towards the cloud era, and now that we are entirely into the cloud. So in again in today's world, you might be using several versions of cloud. You might be using Microsoft Azure, you might be using Microsoft 365, you might be also using AWS or Google Cloud. So those are the cloud-based versions. So that means simply we are not maintaining those servers anymore, but we are just simply using the software as a services, platform as a services, or infrastructure as a services from those vendors. Okay, so when I started to Microsoft 365 as a software as a solution, kind of an offering from Microsoft. Obviously, SharePoint, since it is very much closer to the content collaboration, those kind of a thing. So SharePoint became an integral part of the Microsoft 365. And with Microsoft 365, any of the version that you can take, maybe A5, E5, F1. So those are the flavors of Microsoft 365. So based on what kind of an licenses you take, you will obviously get SharePoint with that. And again, in this kind of a thing, obviously we don't have access to the server, so we need to write our code as a client side object model. So that means the code which can run onto the client or onto the browser, and then it can connect via maybe REST API to the SharePoint, get the data from there, or maybe update the data to the SharePoint. And that was the era when the entire paradigm shifted from server-side object model to the client-side object model. And then that was the era wherein people started writing the code with JavaScript. But again, there was a challenge with that one as well, right? Like right now, the people started writing the JavaScript on top of SharePoint pages, and then it again might bring down the productivity as well, because you're writing your own code at the same time the other developer is writing their own code, and then probably you're hiding something from SharePoint using your code, but at the same time the other developer is making it enable. So there might be a conflict of interest between those two. So at the end, then Microsoft decided like you no longer will be able to write the code directly onto the SharePoint pages. And then in that case, they came up with something called as SharePoint Framework, or this SPFX, wherein you get the framework of JavaScript or TypeScript in which you can write your code. But there is a formula, or there is a framework in which you need to write that code and get it deployed to SharePoint. So that is where the SharePoint framework came into the picture. And right now it is the most adopted kind of a model, wherein not just the SharePoint developers, but also the Microsoft Teams developers, they are using SharePoint framework for writing the apps on top of Microsoft Teams as well. So if in case you are not aware, or you might have attended the Microsoft Teams global hack, which just had happened a couple of weeks back from 1st of June to 15th of June. So there was more focus on using the Teams toolkit as well as the SharePoint framework for developing solutions on top of Microsoft Teams for building the apps. So again, this is not just related to SharePoint at this moment, but again, you can write the beautiful applications like bots or maybe tabs with SharePoint framework as well. Okay, so that is what SharePoint framework. If in case we come to the official definition, the Microsoft definition of SharePoint, so it says that it is just the page and web part model that provides full support for client-side development, easy integration with SharePoint data, and support for open source tooling. So the last word here is pretty much important: open source tooling. So what are those open source tooling? Is like we can use Node.js, or we can use npm node package manager. We can also use yeoman, which is a scaffolding tool for creating your project. We can also use gulp, typescript, and many more kind of an open source tooling. So with that, the thing is pretty much clear that we no longer need to purchase any kind of a licenses to develop your solution. So let's say, for example, specifically I'm talking about Visual Studio. So if in case you are using Visual Studio, obviously we do get the community edition, which is for free if in case you are developing solutions for you, or maybe non-profit kind of a solution. But if in case you are an organization, in that case you need to obviously purchase the paid version of Visual Studio, and then you can start developing solutions on top of it. But at least when it comes to the SharePoint framework, it is entirely open source tooling. So that means even if in case you are coming from a background of JavaScript or TypeScript, or maybe if you have used Angular or React.js in your lifetime, then obviously you are very much through to start creating the SharePoint framework solution. In that case, your learning journey is very much simple. You can simply just adopt to the SharePoint framework to start developing solutions on top of SharePoint. The another thing is like whenever we are developing solutions on top of SharePoint using SharePoint framework, in that case, data becomes a vital thing in that, because SharePoint is majorly known for storing your data. So in that case, mostly it's like you want to interact with your data. So data can be in the form of documents inside of your SharePoint, or maybe it could be in a form of list that are stored in SharePoint. So in that case, we need to have some kind of a mechanism through which we can talk to that SharePoint data, get that data, or maybe update that data. So in that case, the REST API is another mechanism through which we should be able to have that communication with SharePoint. So REST API are nothing but those are kind of an endpoints which are provided by SharePoint, Microsoft SharePoint, which can help you to connect to the data, so that you should be able to read the data from SharePoint as well as write, update, those kind of a thing are possible. Again, this SharePoint framework is not just available in the cloud only. That means for only for SharePoint Online, but it is also available for SharePoint on premises as well. So the SharePoint Online is generally available for SharePoint Online. So the latest and greatest features or the latest version of SharePoint framework can be easily used with SharePoint Online. So that means, let's say, for example, if you want to use the SharePoint Online version or SharePoint framework version of 1.17.3, which is the latest one, you should be able to go ahead and use that directly. So let's say, for example, if I just go into the browser and try to search for SharePoint framework. Okay. So here you should be able to see all of the listing of the SharePoint framework versions that we have got. Okay. So from here you can see that these are the key features and everything. But at the same time, for example, if you want to get started, or if you want to have the latest version of SharePoint deployed, so in that case, let me just search for SharePoint framework version. So probably I can just go to any of the link, and then from there we should be able to see. So this is the entire history. So you can see that SharePoint framework started in the year of 2017, specifically on 22nd of February 2017. So again, this one is almost in the market for more than 5 years now, and then again everyone is using it effectively. So this was the very much first entry of SharePoint framework for SharePoint specific thing, wherein you are just limited to do certain things with SharePoint, like get the data from SharePoint and everything. But eventually over the time, we have got various versions of SharePoint coming through, which is 1.1. Then right now the latest one is 1.17.4, which is just recently introduced 2 or 3 days back, right? So it just got released on 21st of June 2023. So Microsoft is putting so much of effort on getting the SharePoint framework released to the newer versions as well as with the greatest offering. So even they provide the nice documentation about what are the new features as well as capabilities available. So there might be some features that you can see from the technical point of view as well as from the business point of view. So all those history is kind of maintained here, but the major version that you will see, they will start with 1 point something, or at this moment 1 point, but eventually in the future we will obviously start moving towards 2 point something kind of a thing. But again, this for example, let's say we have got this 1.17. On top of that, we have got 1.17.1, which is adding some smaller features on top of it based on the feedback which is being received from the developers as well as from the business. But the major releases are 1 point x point something, and then again from there it evaluates based on the feedback which is being shared by developers as well as by the business. But at this moment, you can see that here we have got 1.17.4, which is capable of developing solutions on top of SharePoint, on top of Microsoft Outlook, Outlook for Web, as well as Microsoft Teams, as well as Microsoft Viva connections. So all those capabilities are available to you. If in case now that, let's say, for example, if you want to set up your development environment for SharePoint framework, but yeah, maybe before that, let me just continue with this, and then we will come back to the point that, let's say, for example, if you want to go ahead and start developing your own SharePoint framework solutions, how you can go ahead about that. All right, so this is the SharePoint framework tool chain that we have got. So that means these are the tools which are needed to get started your journey for developing solutions with SharePoint framework. All right. So the top side here, you can see this one is the server side toolchain. So if in case you are coming from the server side background, you're developing solutions using C# or .NET kind of a thing, then these are the things that you are seeing onto the top. The bottom side is the client side toolchain. That means the client side development. For example, if you are coming from the development of um, Node.js based solutions, or maybe React.js or AngularJS. In that case, you will see some familiar faces here for the client side tooling. But irrespective of that, whether you are starting your journey with server side or client side, obviously with SharePoint framework, we can do the development using client side tool chain only. But this is just the picture which is showing the mapping of, if in case you're familiar with SharePoint, or sorry, if you're familiar with server side toolchain, then what is the equivalent kind of an toolchain available in client side, so that you can start mapping those, or you can start visualizing those in place of the other, and then you can start developing solutions for SharePoint. So let's start with this one by one. So if in case you're developing solutions on .NET, so equivalently we have got Node.js here. So Node.js is something, it will provide the runtime environment for your solutions. So again, for example, if you are not familiar with Node.js, you can just search for Node.js, and then you should be able to see that this is the JavaScript based runtime framework which is available. And then from here, you should be able to download the latest LTS, that means long-term support kind of an solutions for you. But again, there is a catch here that SharePoint framework doesn't support the latest version here. But again, let's say, for example, if you want to see like which is the version that is being supported by SharePoint. So in that case, you can just search for this. And again, there is a documentation available from Microsoft, which shows like if in case you want to go ahead and start using SharePoint Framework 1.17.3, in that case, you need to have the Node.js 16.3. All right. So if in case you have the Node.js version 18.16 installed, probably that might not work. So this is the kind of an table which represents the compatibility versions of the common tools as well as libraries. Those are used along with SharePoint framework. So stick to this table if whenever you are trying to set up your own environment. Otherwise, you might get started installing the latest and greatest softwares, but that might not work with SharePoint framework, right? So this is the table that you should always refer to whenever you want to go ahead and start developing, or start creating your environment for SharePoint framework. All right. So Node.js is for that. Then we have got NPM, which is Node Package Manager. So what is meant by Node Package Manager is that there is a default functionality provided by SharePoint framework. But again, maybe on top of that, you want to go ahead, start developing, or start utilizing few of the capabilities available from the third party packages. So let's say, for example, you want to work with JSON, or if you want to work with XML. In that case, probably you don't want to write your code again from scratch and start doing that, but you can have some kind of an modules or node modules installed from any of the packages that those are available publicly from other developers, and start utilizing those. So maybe I can show you that one as well. So if in case you go to the npm.js, these are all of the packages which are available from where you can start downloading the packages, and you can start building. So let's say, for example, I want to do some magic with JSON. So I can just find out JSON, and then we'll be able to see this is one of the package available from someone that I can start using. Let's say, for example, OpenAI is kind of a buzzword nowadays, and I want to develop some solutions on top of SharePoint framework using OpenAI. But I don't know, like, miss, I know OpenAI, I know SharePoint framework, but probably I don't know, like, how can I start utilizing the OpenAI kind of an functionalities into SharePoint framework. So in that case, the best place is go to the npm.js, start finding the keyword that you want to start utilizing. So in this case, OpenAI. And once you open up any of the package which is available here, these are all of the instructions if in case you want to go ahead and start utilizing this. So let's say in your SharePoint framework based solutions, you want to go ahead, start using OpenAI. In that case, you can just go ahead, run this installation, npm install OpenAI. It will install all of the packages needed to have the communication with OpenAI from your SharePoint framework solution. And again, there will be code samples that you should be able to go ahead and start utilizing in your SharePoint framework solution, so that you are making your SharePoint framework solution more of OpenAI enabled, right? So those are all of the things that you should be able to go ahead and do with Node Package Manager. So if in case you want to have it mapped to the server side version, so you might be using NuGet or Nugget, whatever you can call it, if in case you are using those solutions on .NET based framework. So in that case, what happens is we just right click on our solution, and we download these packages from NuGet. So similarly, we have got this npm kind of an capabilities available onto the client side toolchain, through which we should be able to go ahead and start downloading those packages and start using in our solution. Similarly, let's say, for example, now that you need some kind of an IDE, integrated development environment, to start writing your code. Okay, so obviously that we can write the code in Notepad as well, but we need some support from some kind of an IDEs, so that we should be able to write some nice looking code at the same time. That IDE can prompt us if in case we were writing some, or maybe making some kind of an errors into the syntaxes. So in that case, we can use Visual Studio Code. So it is just the client-side version of Visual Studio itself. So Visual Studio Code is free to use. You can download for free from Visual Studio Code. Uh, from the Microsoft downloads library, and again you can start using it on any of these systems. So this can be also used onto the Linux machine or Mac OS. So it can be used all across any of the systems that we have got. At the same time, we have got support from Human. So Human is nothing but it is a scaffolding tool, right? So now that, let's say, for example, if you are using Visual Studio, so what we do with Visual Studio is we open up the Visual Studio, we click on File, New Project, and we start developing the projects on top of it. Similarly, for Yeoman, we can start using Yeoman with something called as yo@Microsoft/SharePoint. And from there, it will help us to scaffold a project for SharePoint framework using Yeoman. All right. So these are the two tools that you will need to start developing your solutions, or start scaffolding your solutions, and start implementing your code with Yeoman and Visual Studio Code. The other thing is, like, now that we need some kind of a language through which we should be able to write our code. So in the .NET world, you must have used C Sharp, but now that we SharePoint framework, you can write your code using something called as TypeScript or PS. So TypeScript is kind of a superset of JavaScript. If in case you are familiar with JavaScript, TypeScript is just the superset of it, so that you can start writing your code in a strict or typed kind of an fashion, so that you are not leaving everything to the runtime to throw the exception, but at least you are writing some effective code with the help of classes or interfaces, so that you should be able to relate that code very much easily and start developing the effective code, right? The other things that we have got here is gulp as well as webpack. So gulp just is kind of an set of commands through which you should be able to build your solution as well as run your solution. So it just provides the set of commands through which you should be able to run your solutions. All right. So this is just the entire tool chain that is required whenever you want to start developing your solution for SharePoint framework. So now that, let me again come back here and talk about, if in case you want to go ahead and start setting up your SharePoint framework, then how you can go about that. So there is a nice video as well available from Microsoft, which will show you the step-by-step instructions if in case you want to go ahead and start setting up your environment for SharePoint framework development. So first thing here is you need to install the Node.js, but again, make sure that you just install the LTS version of version 16, not version 18, which is the LTS version as of now. But go ahead and start installing version 16. Okay. Again, there is one thing is there is something called as NVM. So if in case you're not familiar with NVM, so an NVM is just one thing like if I just do NVM, so NVM is let's say for example, for some reason you are developing solutions with multiple versions of Node.js. So let's say for example, for SharePoint framework, we need Node.js version of version 16, but at the same time, let's say you are using probably Visual Studio Code extensions for Teams, that is Teams Toolkit, and then we need probably Node.js version 18. So it is not again viable that we keep installing and uninstalling the version at every point. So in that case, what you can do is you can just install this NVM. You can download it from the your favorite search engine, and then you can just type nvm ls. So nvm ls is just the listing. So here you can see that I have got two versions of Node.js installed. So I have got 18.16.0 as well as I have got 16.18.1. So now that I can keep switching between those two versions. So if in case I just type nvm use, and I can start using 16.18.1. So this NVM gives me the flexibility through which I will be able to switch between the multiple versions of Node.js if in case I have it installed. Okay. So again, if in case another thing like why you will need, let's say for example, if you're dealing with the older code that you had developed with SharePoint framework maybe a couple of years back, and at that point there wasn't support for Node version 16. Maybe at that point the support was for Node version 14. Okay, so in that case, you can have multiple versions of Node.js installed with this NVM, and then you can keep switching between these two versions so that you will be able to work with all of the solution irrespective of what kind of an solution that has been developed on top of the Node.js version. Okay, if in case you want to go ahead and install any of the versions, so you can type nvm install, and you just need to know the specific version of Node.js. So let's say for example, if there is a Node version available with 14.15.0, so you can just type nvm install 14.15.0. It will download that version from there and it will start using. So let me just quickly check if I can now run this yo@microsoft/SharePoint with this nvm version. So yo is nothing but the Yeoman generator through which you should be able to go ahead and start scaffolding your solutions for SharePoint. So this @Microsoft/SharePoint has been extended on top of Yeoman, so that this one will give us a wizard through which we should be able to fill out the information, and then this one will help us to scaffold a project for SharePoint framework, which we can later open up in Visual Studio Code and start developing our code on top of it. So usually it takes 1 or 2 minutes. So probably it is still waking up. So let us come back to this bit later by covering some theory. Okay, now that it is here. So okay, so now that what we are going to do is once you will kind of an install everything. For example, if you will install Node.js, then probably you will install the code editor and everything. Or that before that, probably let me just scaffold one solution for you. So this is your solution name. So you can give any of the solution name. So I'm just keeping it SPFX demo itself. These are the type of extensions or the client-side components that we can create with SharePoint Framework. So either we can create a web part or extension or library or adaptive card extension. So web part, that means the one which we should be able to see visually onto the screen. Extensions is something like, let's say, for example, I want to have some kind of an functionality which is running on SharePoint, maybe on the top bar or maybe at the bottom as some kind of an headings or maybe some kind of a links. So we can do that with extension. Library is by its name suggests that it is something which is which is a common code. So if in case you are using the previous version, or if you have been using the .NET or server side code, you must have been creating DLLs, right? Dynamically linked libraries. So this is the same concept. You can have your common code into one library, which can be used by multiple web parts or extension. And the last one here is the adaptive card extension, which is created on top of Viva connections. So this is just one example of Viva connections. And then here you can see these are the web parts that had been created on top of this Viva connection using SharePoint framework. So what we'll do is we'll keep it simple. We'll just try to create one web part. If you want to name your web part, you can type it here, or by default, it is going to take the name as Hello World. So we'll go ahead with that. We'll use the Hello World as our web part name. And now that we have got option here, like how you want to start creating your project, whether it is with the minimal template that we have got, or maybe no framework, that means just the TypeScript kind of an code, or you can start developing these solutions using React. Okay, so probably let's go ahead with React, and then this is how it will start scaffolding your project. So if I go back to this folder, you can see that it has started creating some files. So this is nothing but happening from the Yeoman scaffolding tool, right? So Yeoman is right now going ahead and creating this code for us. And usually it takes maybe 5 minutes. Now that since I have chosen to create this with the React.js. But now that, for example, if you are wondering like that there wasn't any option for AngularJS, so yeah, there is no option for AngularJS here because the kind of an basic difference or the fundamental difference between AngularJS and the React.js is that React.js will just give you some kind of an uh, framework which can run based on any of the framework that you are developing on top of it. So in that case, this is not the entire MVC kind of a thing. The React.js will just give you the view model, but the controller will be from SharePoint framework. And that's the reason you don't see the AngularJS version here. But again, if in case you search for the AngularJS boilerplate for SharePoint framework, you will find that. So if in case still you want to go ahead, start developing your solutions with AngularJS, in that case, you can still do that, but it is not natively supported in SharePoint framework. All right, so once you again come back, you can install the code editor. So either you can use the Visual Studio code, or there is a WebStorm kind of an IDE available, which you can use based on your preference. The other thing is now that we want to start installing all these kind of and things, like we want to install um, Node.js, we want to go ahead and install the gulp, we want to install this webpack. So for that, we have only one command that we can use, like npm install gulp CLI to get the gulp installed, and yo to get the Yeoman scaffolding generator install, and then at the rate Microsoft slash SharePoint slash generator hyphen SharePoint, so that on top of Yeoman, we should be able to have the scaffolding for SharePoint framework, right? And then we want to use this global switch so that this one will be installed at the global level, not at the current folder level from where you are running this command. Okay, so this is just the command that you will need to run. And once you are done with that, you can just run this yo at the rate slash Microsoft slash SharePoint, and then your solution will be entirely ready. All right. So this is how the solutions can be developed. When that solution is scaffolded, we'll go through that. But quickly, just talk about SharePoint framework story. So what usually happens is that we have SharePoint site wherein we have the data or content in the form of document libraries or our SharePoint list. So we have a huge content in SharePoint. But again, now that we have got capabilities from SharePoint framework through which we should be able to create solutions on top of that data, so that we should be able to show that very much effectively on the SharePoint side, right? So again, not just the static data, but again here you can see that this is another example of the SharePoint framework web part that I had created, from where you can click this pencil icon, and even from here you should be able to change the look and feel of the web part by configuring the something called as web part properties here. So again, not just static data, but we should be able to show the dynamic data from SharePoint framework as well, right? Again, as I said, SharePoint framework is not only limited for creating solutions on top of SharePoint, but it goes beyond, and from there we can start developing solutions for Microsoft Teams, Viva Connection, and Outlook. So what kind of a solution that we can go ahead and create with SharePoint framework? So for Microsoft Teams, we can build tabs, personal app, as well as the messaging extension and meeting apps. For SharePoint, we can create the web part extension and library component that we just have seen. At the same time, for the Viva connection, we can create dashboard card or the adaptive card extension, the option that we just have seen, as well as for the Outlook for web, we can create add-ins using SharePoint framework. All right, so quickly, while our project is scaffolding, let me just quickly walk you through the Microsoft Teams extensibility with SharePoint Framework, like how you should be able to extend SharePoint Framework apps to Microsoft Teams. So as of now, for example, if you have developed any of the SharePoint Framework solution, obviously you can take it to the Microsoft Teams as an app or personal app or as a messaging extension or maybe a meeting app. So let us quickly see what is meant by that. So the extensibility platform from SharePoint Framework started with SharePoint Framework 1.8, through which we can build SharePoint Framework solutions, for example, tab, which are entirely context aware of Teams. So if in case you are running the same SharePoint Framework web part in a in a SharePoint site, that can give you the context of SharePoint site itself, so that you can show the information related to your SharePoint site. But at the same time, when it is hosted inside of Microsoft Teams, it is context aware that now that it can show the information from the Microsoft Teams from which it is belong to, right? So now that here you can see that it is showing welcome to Teams, and it is showing the team kind of an information. So sorry for that font, but it is showing all that kind of an information. The second thing is like also with SharePoint Framework, starting with SharePoint Framework version 1.10, you can start creating app for Microsoft Teams. So app is nothing but the app which can, or the personal app is nothing but it is an app which can be hosted onto the left rail of the Microsoft Teams. So whenever you will open up Microsoft Teams onto the left rail, you can click these three dots, and from here you can find an app, and then pin that app onto your left rail so that you can start using that functionality. So that functionality is also available with SharePoint framework starting with version 1.10, so that you can start developing this personal app with SharePoint framework. And then again, lastly, it is about the messaging extension. So messaging extension is nothing but whenever you're composing a message, you can click those three dots here. So from here, you can see that we have these three dots. Once you will click that, you will get some kind of an pop-up. You can select the information that you want to search for. You can take that information, and it can be passed on to your teams, right? So here we are using this messaging extension for showing the planet in kind of an information. We can select the planet that we want to go ahead and start showing onto the Microsoft Teams. Once we click that, again, this is a bot which can post that information on your Microsoft Teams conversation about the planet that you have selected, right? So if in case you just want to know more about how that Planet Explorer has been created, so here we need multiple components like a bot, Microsoft Azure web app, SharePoint Framework web part, as well as Microsoft Teams. So You must be aware that now that we no more have the bot channel registration, but now that we have got new offering from Microsoft Azure, which is Azure bot. So firstly, you need to start developing that Azure bot or create that Azure bot resource in your Microsoft Azure portal. Then you can go ahead and create your um, Microsoft Teams application using the Microsoft Teams domain generator, and then again you can use this Microsoft Azure web app. Once you do that, you can go ahead and start developing your SharePoint framework solution, starting with SharePoint Framework 1.11, and it can simply respond back to the user interaction. So let's say, for example, the planets that you have seen onto the image, that was nothing but the SharePoint Framework web part. So whenever you will click on any of the planet, it is going to have a communication with your bot. Bot will again take the information about the selected planet, and it will post that as an adaptive card onto your Microsoft Teams. Okay, so those kind of things are as well possible. The other things which are possible with Microsoft Teams is the meeting app. So meetings in Microsoft Teams are no more limited to just having a conversation with your colleagues. Like maybe we just start with the meeting, we just say hi, hello, we just discuss the agenda, and that's it. It means the meetings are going beyond wherein we need to have some kind of an interactive sessions or at least interactive participation from all of your colleagues or all of your attendees. So for that, the SharePoint framework supports by creating certain kind of an apps through which you can go ahead, add those kind of an apps into your Microsoft Teams and get the information. So let's say, for example, I want to know everyone's opinion in Microsoft Teams meeting. Then probably I should not just ask on the call that, okay, what do you think about this, or which option is more viable for us. Probably you can create some kind of a poll. You can present that poll to your participants, and then from there you will get more engagement, and you will have some kind of a concrete results that you can use to support your decisions. Okay, and that is where SharePoint framework will help you more by creating those kind of an meeting apps for Microsoft Teams. So what is meant by meeting apps is like whenever we have a meeting in Microsoft Teams, or maybe in general, the meeting has got certain meeting life cycle. Okay, so there is a pre-meeting kind of an experience, like now that I want to host the meeting, but before that meeting happens, I probably want to have some kind of an information gathered from the attendees. Okay, so all those kind of an things will come as the pre-meeting app experience. So what I can do is I can create an app. I can add that app as the pre-meeting app experience into the Microsoft Teams, and then whenever the attendees will click that invitation, they will be able to see that app. So here is one example. Now that we are creating that meeting, and this is the SharePoint Framework extension web part, which is meeting questionnaire. So this one will help the attendees to probably post the question about this meeting, like a pre-meeting app experience. And then when they will post the question, those questions will be seen by everyone. So here the attendees can go ahead, click new question, they can type the title for it, description for it, and then they can just click on save. Now that you can see that this is a question being posted from the attendee, so that when the meeting will start, the organizer as well as the other meeting invitees, they can go ahead and start looking at those questions, and then probably you will be able to have the effective meeting. Rather than in a meeting, you want to ask user about what are your questions, you will be able to collect those questions beforehand using this kind of an meeting app experience. The second thing is probably in meeting app kind of an experience. So now that, let's say, for example, I'm conducting a meeting right now, and instead of you asking the question verbally, I can probably present you with some kind of a poll which you can react to, and then I get the concrete information that I can use for any kind of a decision making. Then the last type of meeting life cycle experience is the post meeting app, right? So now that we are done with our meeting, but meeting without any conclusions are of no use. So obviously you want to have some kind of an post meeting experience for your attendees, like, okay, maybe this is the MOM of our meeting, this is what we discussed, these are the action items which are coming out of this meeting. So for that, again, you probably need some kind of an app through which you can create those action items, create that MOM for your attendees. Otherwise meeting will just happen on a time, and that's it, they will lead to nowhere. Okay, so this kind of an apps can be developed with SharePoint framework, so that you can be able to have that experience for your users. All right, so these are the things that can be easily developed. And again, for example, if you want to know more how these apps can be developed, these are few of the resources. Even I will be sharing those onto our Teams chat, that if in case you want to go ahead, start developing this kind of an experience, this is how you can do it. So let me quickly again go back to the server. Now that we have our scaffolding ready, if you remember, we had developed the SharePoint framework web part. I will just use or type code space dot, so that it can open up the solution in our favorite IDE, which is Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to use one command here called as gulp serve, so that it will compile my project and it will start running this solution on something called as an SharePoint hosted workbench, okay, or maybe a local workbench. So let the gulp serve run. Till the time, what I will do is let us spend some time by looking at the code. So this is the code that has been developed. Here you can see few of the Visual Studio Code launching as well as settings. If in case you want to see like how whenever the code is launching, how that one will or that should behave in Visual Studio Code, all those kind of configurations can be done from here. You do have certain configurations available to work with your visuals to with your SPFX web part. So which is the entry point and where the manifest is hosted. If in case you are supporting the localization, that means multiple languages for your SharePoint framework solution, then how you want to go ahead about that. So there are multiple configurations files available. Oh, okay, so right now this one is working. Okay, so what I will do is let me just run this command here, so that this one is nothing but the workbench onto which we should be able to see that web part. Okay, so this one is still running. Probably we'll get this warning that cursor is still not running, because for the first time it takes some time to go ahead and start running this. But whenever the entire gulp server is run, we should be able to see that web part here. Meanwhile, let us continue with looking at the code structure. Here we have got library, which is the temporary folder, which does mapping of your TypeScript file to the JavaScript files. And then again, all of the node modules that we have installed, we should be able to see on in this folder. Here we have got this SRC, oh, sorry, here we have got this SRC folder, which is the source folder. Since we had created web part, we should be able to see all of the web part related code here. So this is the entire code available in TypeScript and React component. So if in case I open up this components. So here you can see that we have got one TSX, which is the React component, right? And then again, we do have support from the SCSS, which is a CSS based version, wherein we can have the CSS styling done for all of the components that we have got here. So this is pretty much the code that we have got. And now that, as I said, if in case you are developing a solution with SPFX, you are also making it available on top of Teams as well. So this is that folder wherein you can just create your manifest file. And again, these are the logos that one will be used as a packaging logos for your uh, Teams app, and then that can be shown into your Microsoft Teams. So now that, let me just go back, let me just do a quick refresh. And now that we have our workbench ready, onto which we should be able to test out this web part. So now that here you can see that this is the local web part which is running as a hello world. Since we did not rename our project, we have this hello world here. And you can see that quickly we have this entire solution available to us, which is probably not doing anything great, but at least this one is showing how we should be able to go ahead and start developing solutions on top of SharePoint, right? And then again, here we have got the pencil icon as well. Oh, sorry, not here, probably here. So this is the edit web part pencil icon, through which we should be able to define the web part properties. And whenever we will update this web part properties, we should be able to refresh the data or update the logic in our web part to show the refresh logic based on the web part properties selection, right? So this is the simplest form of how these web parts can be created. And now that if you want to take it further, you can use those npm packages, as well as you can write your own code in these files to go ahead and start developing those solutions. So quickly, like let's say for example, you want to show or you want to see some kind of an uh, solution that had been created on top of it. So I can just quickly go here, and here you can see this one is one of the web part that has been created in the past. So this one will show the upcoming public holidays for India location at this moment, based on the SharePoint framework solution. Okay, so this one is nothing but the SharePoint framework solution. If I click on upcoming holidays, this one will open up another card, and from here we should be able to see the upcoming holidays here as well. Let's say, for example, someone changes the location. We can just click update location. We can select the other location, just click on update, and this one will get auto refresh, and this one will start showing the upcoming holidays for that location. Again, if you click upcoming holidays, it will open up a card view wherein it will show the upcoming holidays for that region or that country or that location. So how this has been developed? Again, this is one has been developed as an adapt to card extension in for SharePoint framework, and all of the data that you see here, like all of the images, the name of the festival, as well as the date of that festival, is nothing but this is the information which is stored into a SharePoint list, and then we are simply using PNP.js kind of a thing to go ahead and start using this information, right? So this is how you should be able to go ahead start developing solutions on SharePoint framework. Again, the code samples, if in case you want to explore the codes, this is the location where all those codes are available, which I just have shown you right now. Quickly that again, we can create this rich kind of an experience with SharePoint framework, which is Edge, the public holidays thing that I just have seen shown to you. Here you can create templates like a basic card template or image card template or primary text template. Another thing here, like it also gives some kind of an advanced capabilities. For example, if you want to share the location, a geolocation kind of a thing, it can be done. At the same time, for example, if you want to have some media uploading done, maybe uploading of files or videos from your SharePoint framework solutions to SharePoint, even that is possible. So this kind of an functionalities are pretty much important for the frontline workers who are probably moving from location to location, capturing the information. So in that perspective, the SharePoint framework provides lot many capabilities for them as well. Okay, now that, for example, if you want to go ahead, start your journey with SharePoint framework, then do we need to do everything from scratch? Then the answer is no. There is something called as PNP, patterns and practices, which provides you the best practices as well as the solutions which are generally available for you to go ahead and start using. So if in case you want to start your journey, I will emphasize you more to pay attention onto this PNP, right? Okay, so what is mean by this PNP? Like PNP is it is kind of an initiative from the communities itself, wherein you should be able to see lots of samples, lots of repositories. For example, you want to go ahead start using web parts extension, or maybe some kind of an PNP JS for faster development with SharePoint framework. Those things can be done. So let's say, for example, if you want to go ahead start using PNP, so there is one. URL that you should look into this aka.ms/m365 PNP. Okay, so this is the URL which is going to land you to this page pnp.github.io. So this is a home page from where you should be able to see the invitations for the Power Platform community calls as well as Viva connection, SharePoint framework, Power Platform, Office IDs, those kind of an community calls which are happening every month or bi-weekly kind of an calls that you can attend. At the same time, for example, if you want to see the past videos, the past recordings of those calls, or maybe some kind of solutions those have been developed, you can watch that one as well. If in case you as a community contributor, you want to go ahead and start contributing, then there is a sharing is caring kind of a program uh, to which you can enroll and explore like how you should be able to contribute to this community overall. And again, there is a recognition program available with that one as well, so that your work will be appreciated and you will be given with some digital badges as well. Okay, so don't miss out on this opportunity, explore it more. Again, for example, if you're looking out for some kind of best practices guidance, in that case there is a guidance available for each of the services, including Microsoft Teams, Graph, SharePoint Framework. So go ahead and explore this one as well. Again, for example, these are the samples and solutions. Let's say, for example, you now want to develop some kind of a web part on SharePoint Framework. In that case, probably you don't need to start from scratch. Just look into this repository. Here you should be able to find most of the web parts which are available for you. So let's say, for example, you want to develop something for holidays. So let us see, we already have the holiday calendar here, right? So that means you don't need to go ahead and start developing that code from scratch. You already have that, go ahead and start using that. So let's say, for example, if you don't remember any of the sample, but you know that Nandadeep had it created, just go ahead, search with my name, and all of the web parts that I have contributed so far, you should be able to see it here. And probably the timeline is the one which I was showing into one of my demo or maybe onto the presentation. So this is one of the web part from where you should be able to create a timeline kind of a thing from your SharePoint list. So this is how that one will look like. Okay. So if you have been tasked with, or if you are looking out for some kind of a solution, probably don't try to do it from scratch. There is a PNP available. Go ahead, start exploring it, as well as start contributing to it as well. Right, so there are tons of samples available. Go ahead, explore those, and then you should be able to go ahead and start your journey with SharePoint very easily. Okay, then quickly, like why we have this PNP kind of an initiative for community is like just to help promote fantastic community projects which are being developed by the open community, as well as you can demonstrate how you can benefit from using all the solutions. And the motivation is simple, is to contribute back so that everyone wins, right? Okay, so now that, for example, what is the problem that we are going to resolve with this PNP, right? So now that we don't have probably enough out of box building blocks available in SharePoint framework, or maybe time that is required to create and maintain your own reusable code, or maybe maintain your own documentation, or again, you need to ensure high standards are being implemented into your SharePoint framework solutions. So in that case, look out for PNPs, because all of those solutions have been reviewed thoroughly by the community contributors, and then again, it is made available for you for any kind of any kind of solutions that you are looking out for. Again, all those solutions have been implemented with good practices, as well as if in case you are facing any of the issue with any of the sample, you can just create an issue for that, and then definitely someone from the community will help you, right? So those are the benefits of using PNP in this case. So this solution is pretty much simple, that we start using PNP so that that one will significantly reduce your development time as well as maintenance time. At the same time, you will get help by providing the feedback, as well as if in case you think there is some bug, you can also go ahead, submit those pull requests, so that you are also contributing back to the community, right? So quickly about those SharePoint PNP, these are all of the solutions which are available, or repositories which are available, that you should be able to go ahead and start utilizing. For example, SharePoint Framework Web Parts extension PNP.js. So PNP.js is a popular library if in case you want to have CRUD kind of an operations with SharePoint, as well as maybe with Graph API. In that case, you can simply go ahead and start using this PNP.js. If in case you are looking out for some kind of an reusable controls, then you can obviously explore these two repositories which are available. If in case you want to automate your work that you are doing for Microsoft 365, then there is a uh, code repository available for CLI for Microsoft 365. That one will be more for the administrator as well as developers to go ahead and start doing their jobs effectively, right? And again, there is another sample called as PNP Modern Search. So go ahead and explore all of these samples on your own. At the same time, like why you should use Zen, because those are coming from the first party SharePoint solutions. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. This one will simply help you to speed up your development, as well as this entire approach is a community driven. So all of the ideas and questions are always welcome there, right? So these are the solutions that I was talking about. Go ahead, explore this SPFX web parts. Go ahead, explore this SPFX extension as well, so that you will get fair idea like how you should be able to go ahead and start using those, or in which or what ways you should be able to develop these solutions for SharePoint framework. Also explore these React controls. So if in case you are using the React, so in that case there are reusable controls available which you can directly start utilizing into your SharePoint solution projects. All right, so Again, there are various field controls available, and start using those as one, that one as well. So you can just install this dependency into your project, and that's it. So these are few of the resources that probably you can go ahead, start using today to go ahead, start developing your web parts extension. But the main link here is aka.ms/m365pnp. So go ahead, start exploring the repositories which are available under pnp, and then start using those web parts extension as well as the React controls that we have got. And with that, thank you very much for having me here, and hope this session was helpful to you to have the introduction to SharePoint framework and start developing your SharePoint framework solution. Again, just to reiterate, SharePoint framework is not just limited to creating the solutions for SharePoint, but it is going beyond. You can start developing solutions for Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva connections, as well as Outlook for web as well, right? So I wish you a good journey with SharePoint framework, and thank you for having me here.